please?
Oh, sure, any name.
I think these are all great comments that have been made. I just want to say up front, I don't think competition is a bad thing. I think in most marketplaces it's an excellent thing. And as Steve just mentioned, this kind of offering has been going on in our town for a long time, so I therefore also have no problem with two different land uses by one property. I just don't feel it's an issue. And you know, personally, I feel like Dan did when he started this discussion, that I think this is kind of a non-issue that we're beating around. I think there's much larger issues, much bigger fish to fry here this evening than this kind of non-issue. So I'd love to see us move on from this topic. It's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Paul Cabilio.
Yes, this has been a use in town for many years. It's not unusual for an apartment or a building that's heavily student-based to become vacant in the summer, and therefore the rooms are then used for another purpose. I don't have any problem with it as long as it's managed properly.
I guess my question is whether or not in the examples we've used, it is an entirely comparable situation. I understand Roselawn, but I expect it's zoned and it is a hotel or motel accommodation. The fact that the owner, and it's treated that way, in the way it's approved, taxed, and dealt with, and everything else. The fact that the owner may sometimes decide to rent on an 8-month basis or a 6-month basis is presumably at their discretion, but it's a single. There's something about the fact that we are allowing a single building to be designated as 2 land uses, not to be used in that way. We're essentially saying that it has those two different functions, and that seems to me to be the root of the disadvantage that the accommodation operators complain to us about. And I think that's different than a motel unit, for example, that chooses to always be a motel, but rent its units on a continuous basis to students at one point and to tourists at another point. So I mean, that was the issue that I was trying to get to. This seems to me to be a very different kind of situation. And while one of the things we are restricted to this evening is talking about the 4 items that council has directed to us, so I acknowledge that restriction. We did not deal with this development as a part-time commercial development. So I mean, as a committee, we have an issue here too. I mean, if we are going to deal with something that is a partly a hotel and partly a residential unit, we should be careful about how we assess it. Again, for example, on the parking, we assess the parking requirement associated with the commercial, but only the commercial that's the full-time commercial. We treated the units 100% as residential for the purposes of calculating what we thought the parking requirement should be. So we're pretty sloppy in that respect. But in part, I think, because it's an odd situation where we're saying something, as I said, can be a rental unit one day and a hotel unit the other day. I'm not entirely sure that there's something there that's different for me, but I'll leave it at that.
And I've made a note of parking. I wrote it, not to be discussed today, but. Steve Manson.
If I, just as a way to proceed, we're just providing information back to council. We're not approving, disapproving. So I think a good way to proceed is simply take okay, what's your position, and basically there are those that seem to have no problem with the mixed use, those that do, and then here's the report card. So we do it that way as opposed to try to reach a consensus.
Right, so you're suggesting we won't have a motion saying...
Well, we're not going to reach a consensus, okay? It's
right.
Unlikely, okay?
Yeah.
So just, okay, so he's opposed to it. I don't see a problem.
Yeah.
So here it is. It's 5, 4, 6 against, and then council has their information.
Is there any input from our mayor or our, on this process? Oh wait, sorry, Dan Sparkman.
I think it's a wonderful idea to take a straw poll on this. I just will mention that in regards to parking, it's my understanding that there are provincial regulations about the requirements for a hotel type accommodation, which would already cover parking among other things. And can you comment on that, Craig?